Wish you Chag Sameach for the first night of Hanukkah. You may or may not have already lit your candles, we have. Thank you for joining. This is the last talk for our sort of winter 2020 season, which, as you can imagine, has been totally changed dramatically by COVID, because normally we would meet face to face, but obviously, like everyone else, we're doing these Zoom talks. And the film he's going to talk about is The 100 Faces, which features a really wide diversity of the UK Jewish community, and he's going to explain how he achieved that. And they actually won the Gold Award at the Robinson International Short Film Competition. Benjamin also sings with a Jewish male voice choir called Mosaic Voices. And if you like, they're absolutely brilliant. If you like to hear them, you can go, they have got various videos on YouTube. So if you Google Mosaic Voices, you can hear them singing. It's actually very wonderful. Anyway, I shall pass over to Benjamin now. And throughout the talk, if you could make sure you are muted, so we don't get any background noise or feedback. But as I said, in the Q&A, if you've got a question to ask, we will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. So thanks very much. Benjamin, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and Chag Sameach from me as well. I'm Benjamin Till. I am a composer and a filmmaker. And for probably the best part of 20 years now, I have been carving out, I suppose, a niche for myself as a filmmaker who specializes in what's called the documentary musical. And the idea of the documentary musical is that you tell an ordinary documentary story through song. So my speciality is working with ordinary people, real people. I don't like either of those two phrases, but people who might not necessarily be performers themselves. I will interview them for long periods of time, and I will then create what they say verbatim as lyrics and set them to music, and then hand it back to them, teach them how the tune goes. And so in a sense, the people in my films are always singing their own words, warts and all. I'm a big fan of regional dialects and grammatical incorrections. He says grammatically incorrectly. And so that's one of the things that I specialize in. And I've had a fairly lengthy career. I've won some nice awards. One of my probably crowning glories was I realized that I couldn't always expect other people to be in my films if I wasn't prepared to do them myself. And so I married my husband on television in the form of a musical on Channel 4, which was BAFTA nominated, and it won a number of awards. And that was just a wonderful experience to be the first gay man in this country to be married, which felt like a great watershed moment, and I was very proud to do so. In terms of this film, the film that you're about to see, it's called 100 Faces. And it comes out of the fact that I discovered at a relatively late stage in my life that I was Jewish. Now, it sounds like a strange thing to discover, and the clues were there. And we always knew, I suppose I always knew that I had Jewish blood. That was never a question in my family. There was always a sense that we would talk about, my granny would talk about her cousins on the Brick Lane who were costumers. So a lot of clues were there, and it was a sort of an open secret. But I think what had happened, my grandmother, my mother's mother, moved to the Midlands and married out, if you like. And I think she was terrified, really, that people would discover that she was Jewish, because I think for her, she was in a non-Jewish area, Coventry. Rugby actually. I think she felt that maybe she wouldn't be able to be the person she wanted to be whilst she had a Jewish identity. It's a great sadness to me that I never got to actually talk to her about that. She died before I realized that the maternal, a direct maternal line, and therefore that I was Jewish. And the really interesting thing about it was that I, as a child, was obsessed with Jewish culture. All my first compositions that I wrote were named after my favorite Jewish festivals. I used to go to the library and read books about Judaism. So I suppose, and actually, when you know, now I know a lot about Jewish music. Bizarrely, I was sort of getting it right as a 13-year-old. I was using some of the modes that are very familiar to me now, having worked in synagogues. So there's a very strange relationship that I have with Jewishness, and to discover that I was technically Jewish was, you know, about the best gift that I could ever have received. And I always used to say when I was younger that I never understood anti-Semitism because I couldn't understand why anyone would have an issue with a Jewish person. And then I, of course, realized that I was talking about myself. So the 100 Faces project was really just so that I could find out who my new family was. You know, I've been skirting around on the outskirts of a family, and I didn't know who they were. I didn't know how diverse Jewish people were. I you know, until I went to university, I'd never met a Jewish person apart from all of my family. But I hadn't had a conversation with anyone about being Jewish, or I didn't know that I was. And so when I found out I was, I thought, let's see who these Jewish people are. Let's see who my cousins and my brothers and my sisters are. And so the idea came about that I could find one Jewish person born every year from 1918 to 2017. And the idea for the film would be that the first person featured in the film would be a 1-year-old, and then a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. And within 15 minutes, what you would see is an entire lifetime of Jewish faces flashing past. And within that, you know, diversity tick, because you've got somebody of every conceivable age, 1 to 100 in a film. But within that, I wanted to find out how diverse Jewish people were. Because the one thing I was aware of was that there was a lot of things were written about a Jewish look. And in a way, you know, there is a Jewish look. I think, you know, I think I probably have a Jewish look. But what I didn't know was how broad the Jewishness was, how much of a sort of a fan, if you like, it was, you know, all the way from atheist to liberal to reform to Masorti to modern Orthodox to Haredi, you know, all the way across. And that each of those different branches of Judaism had hugely different beliefs. And I think one of the things that I was very proud of, and one of the things why I felt that I could really embrace my Jewishness was because Jewish people were the first religion to embrace same-sex marriage. And so, you know, all the way along the fan up until Masorti, including Masorti in many cases, people of the same sex can get married in shuls, and we were unique in that respect, apart from Quakers, in terms of same-sex marriage in places of worship. So that made me feel incredibly proud and made me feel like I really could embrace that. But, you know, then I used to look at a lady in my synagogue who was black, and I used to look up at the gallery and see her up there and think, gosh, that's unusual. And then there was a Chinese lady as well, and I thought, yeah, this is bigger than I thought. So yeah, how do you get one person every year? I decided to do it by year and not by age, because obviously I could have had 2 people born in the same year who were 99 and 100. So I thought if the person represented the year, that would be the way forward. And some are really easy. It's very, very easy, bizarrely, to find a 100-year-old, because lots of people are aware when someone in their community is 100. They're not as aware of when somebody's 49. They might be aware of the 0 birthdays. Oh, she had her 70th recently, or she's probably 71 now. And the other thing I discovered very, very quickly was it was quite easy to find the very old, because there are so many wonderful care homes, Jewish care homes, and they have the records about what year all of the people who live there were born in. So that became quite easy. But there were certain ages that we just found incredibly difficult. 1956, really, really hard. And you know, you'd think you were getting really close to someone, you know, you'd speak and they'd say, oh, she's definitely born in 1956, and then she'd be born in 1957. And so we ended up with this jigsaw that we were creating of, you know, some people we found, and then another amazing person will come forward with the most beautiful face. And you already had somebody born in that year. And it was the most heartbreaking thing, because what I wanted was to include everyone, but I knew that I could only include one person born in each year. So the jigsaw was slowly came together. We wrote to, we went, I spoke on the radio, I put out appeals, I sent out emails. I started to populate it with people who I knew. Various famous people came forward and said that they would like to take part. Maureen Lipman, Vanessa Feltz, Fenella Fielding, Natalie Klein, Stephen, what's he called? Stephen, the actor. Anyway, so lots and lots of really interesting people were coming forward. And there were people that I wanted to feature as well. I wanted Holocaust survivors. I wanted kinder-transportees. I wanted to find, and the big holy grail was trying to find somebody that had been at Cable Street, because I feel that that's the thing that English Jewish people should feel so proud about. And I wanted to thank him, actually, or her. And in the end, our 97-year-old turned out to have been at Cable Street. And I was speaking on the radio in Northamptonshire, on BBC Radio Northampton, about something completely different. And then he said to me, oh, what are you doing at the moment? And I said, well, I'm trying to find 100 Jewish people. And actually, I want to find somebody born who was at Cable Street. And somebody who was listening went, oh, my dad was at Cable Street, and put me in touch. So, you know, by the end of the jigsaw puzzle, we had people, 10 people who would consider themselves to be BAME, to be Black or Asian or ethnic minorities, 10 people who were part of the LGBT community, 5 rabbis, 2 chazans, 2 blind people, 3 physically disabled people, 5 Holocaust survivors, 3 kinder-transportees, and 2 people who had fought at Cable Street. I think the Holocaust survivors were, for me, quite extraordinary. And they taught me the importance of Yiddish as a language, because I went to the Holocaust Centre in North London, and they were having an event called Yiddish and Kiddish, Kiddish and Yiddish. So they'd eat food and then they'd speak to each other in Yiddish. And you'd see this group of very old, frail, perhaps, looking people sitting around a table whose faces were coming alive, speaking Yiddish. And I asked one of the chaps, and he's in the film, he says, I wish I hadn't had to suffer so much for being Jewish. You'll see him when you see the film. And I said to him, well, why is Yiddish so important to you? And he said, Yiddish saved my life. He said, I trusted people who spoke Yiddish. And when the train rolled in to Auschwitz and I was 15, there were people in prison uniforms, you know, the inmates, if you like, who were by the side of the railway. And as the train came into the station at Auschwitz, they shouted in Yiddish, if they give you food, eat it immediately. Don't hide your food. And if they ask you how old you are and you're younger than 16, tell them you're 16. And so this guy who was 15 thought, okay, I trust them. And when they lined them up, when they got off the train at Auschwitz, he said, they said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 16. And it saved his life. So that was, you know, one of the extraordinary things that I discovered in my journey. And I discovered all sorts of other wonderful things, like the number of books that Jewish people have. I just think Jewish people tend to have more books. That's something I discovered having walked into many, many, many people's houses. I always remember my mother, when I was growing up, she used to say, well, you don't have net curtains because people need to be able to look into your house to count how many books you have. So I was brought up with a lot of books. And now I'm beginning to wonder whether that was a Jewish thing. So yes, I think the one thing I'll talk about before you see the film is jeopardy. Now, obviously, if you're trying to find 100 people, things go wrong. Our 94-year-old, he was learning his music, he was going to sing for us, and he died. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was devastated. Fenella Fielding, who I mentioned earlier, we turned up to film her, and she had a stroke while we were trying to film her. And suddenly we, of course, couldn't use her in the film. She's sadly now died. But then we had 2 days of filming left to find somebody else who was 93 years old. And just so happened that somebody in the film, her mother was exactly that age. So she stepped in. So things kind of go wrong. And it was also slightly embarrassing sometimes for me as a Jewish person who didn't really know Jewish culture. And I remember going to Finsbury Park Synagogue, and Finsbury Park Synagogue is quite frum. It's modern Orthodox, but it's on the fringes of the Haredi community, and quite a lot of Haredi people go there because the services start later. And they called me up. And I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea. I didn't know what being called up meant. And they you know, and I just must have seemed like such a hit from the sticks. And they said to me, well, what's your name? And I said, Benjamin. And they said, Benjamin Ben. And I went, yeah, Ben. And they went, Benjamin Ben. And of course, they were asking me what my father's name was. I had no idea. So they kept having to call me Benjamin Ben, which was just an extraordinarily embarrassing thing. And as I realized what was going on, my heart sank, and I thought, oh no, I'm insulting everyone in this shul. So that was, you know, that was a rather embarrassing moment. Everything was brought together. People told me before we worked out what they were going to say. I wanted people to have 3 to 5 seconds on screen to express what being Jewish meant to them. That was all they were asked to do. Those who could sing sang what they wanted to say. Those who couldn't sing just spoke. And And then the music, I wrote the music, and that was another jigsaw, because what you're trying to do is, this person needs to sing, so and this person's going to sing, so I can run a melody between these 2 years, but then the melody has to stop here for this person who's going to speak. And I wrote a piece of music for string orchestra, and we went to Israel to record the orchestra. Which was a huge, huge thrill to record the Israel Camera Orchestra in Tel Aviv. And that was just one of the most magical experiences of my life. The interesting thing is, I wanted to write English music, because the one thing that I felt about British Jewish people was that they felt British. It felt like there's a quintessential Englishness to them. And I remember playing the film to somebody from Israel, and he looked at the 100-year-old in it, and he said, well, she's like the Queen. And she sort of is, And so I wanted the music to have an essence of Jewishness, but also to feel very English. So I wrote music that felt very much in the style of Vaughan Williams, somebody like that, English musical renaissance. And we took it to the orchestra, most of whom were Russian Jewish people, and they had no point of reference for English Renaissance music. So you'd say to them, a bit like Elgar, a bit like Vaughan Williams, and they'd just look blankly, a bit like Holst, blank. And so that was quite interesting. It's sort of taking a style of music to an orchestra who weren't used to playing that particular style of music. But in the end, they did a wonderful job. And I think probably now is a really good time to play the film. What I will say is that I will give you all, or Yoav will give you a link so that you can watch the film again, or you can watch it in your own time. So if it does get stuttery, or it's too loud, or something goes wrong, or the sound gets out of time with the visuals, which can happen on a Zoom thing, then you can watch it again in your own time, and you can see how it's meant to be seen. So don't panic too much if it looks a bit strange. And if you want to watch it again, I encourage you to watch it again, because it goes past very, very quickly. You'll miss quite a lot. So anyway, this is 100 Faces, made in 2018, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Benjamin. So I'm just going to suggest, if you want a bit of Hanukkah fun and you have a pen and paper beside you, you might want to write down the people you recognize. In fact, Benjamin's already given away a few of the names, though he didn't say the surname of the famous Jewish actor called Stephen, who I did recognize. And at the end, there is a list of all the names. So when we get to the end, I can pause it and you can tick off how many you got it right. But if you know rabbis, you have a distinct advantage, because as you said, there's quite a few rabbis. So and one other thing, as I said, if the sound is too quiet, too loud, you have to adjust your own volume. So let's hope technology is going to work now.
What does it mean to be Jewish? You can't eat sweets with gelatine in. Donuts for Hanukkah. Nutella and passion with sprinkles. It was a good religion to be put in. Eating different types of foods during festivals. We love Israel because we're Jewish and it's our country. I love presents for Hanukkah. I sometimes eat kosher.
It's about learning to lane.
It means driving past shul on Shabbat and ducking down so that nobody sees we're in the car.
It's about learning from the experiences of our ancestors to make the world a better place.
It
makes me feel safe and secure in a puzzling and scary world.
It's about hitting people with the spring onion around the Seder table.
Years go by, memories fly. Where do they go?
Where do they hide?
A lifetime of faces forgotten in a blink of an eye.
It's having a community, no matter where I am in the world.
Remember me, remember my face. I won't be with you for long. But my echo is endless. Just listen and you'll know that I'm here in a world that is not so far away.
When there's food, there's family. When there's family, there's food. Who ate all the smoked salmon?
I'm the queen of Knedla. I will eat them all.
It's about asking questions and only getting questions back as answers.
Converting felt natural and right.
From year to year we pass on the baton of love, wisdom and hope. Our voices still singing the lullabies of the past. From face to face and mother to mother, the challenges never end.
But the laughter and music goes on and on and on and on.
I feel lonely.
It's the constant internal struggle between my godly soul and my animal soul.
Judaism for me is welcoming, inclusive, and meaningful.
It's my connection to my Bubba. She was my favourite person.
Thinking anyone who does more than you is Meshuggah from. Thinking anyone who does less than you is basically a Gentile.
Lighting candles on a Friday night with my wife and children and counting all my blessings.
It just means caring.
Oh, humor and melodies give us light to find our way home.
Any general statement you make about Jews can be disproved by pointing at a different kind of Jew.
Quart vial of Mahler Symphony and a portion of chopped liver.
I'm proud to be a Jewess from Cochin in Kerala, India.
It's about being in a warm bath that I need to keep filling up with lovely hot water. Lovely hot water.
It means sending my children to Gesher so they know who they are.
Being compelled to make the world a better place by looking forward, but yet always having to look over your shoulder.
It means suffering from catastrophic thinking with specific anxiety that there won't be enough food.
It's choosing to live life to the full, in spite of almost overwhelming sadness.
Developing resilience to shame and learning to love myself.
An ancestral Yiddish chorus comments on every slice of challah. And when its members die, you miss them.
It's about living a life of ordinary human decency and loving God.
It means in the worst of times, you can still laugh.
Being Jewish makes me want to stand up and make a difference.
It means being part of a past that makes me so grateful to be present.
Chicken soup might cure all illnesses, but a bad matzo ball makes a good paperweight.
It's keeping this shaitel on when I'm going for the big shot in tennis.
It's the Moroccan customs of my dear wife Veronique, from couscous on Friday night to a candle by her grave.
It means going to Jerusalem for the first time and knowing I'd walked every street.
I like Hanukkah and the bird.
Being Jewish is not only a religion, it's a race. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Worshipping life, individuality and imperfection, not people, death and suffering.
You can go with it, or you can go without it, but you'll always be Jewish.
It's my DNA, it's how other people see me, it's me.
It means working towards a messianic future.
It's not about wallowing in suffering. It's about dancing on the coffee table of existence.
There's a thud in my blood and a dart in my heart which says, in spite of hate, create.
12 years in Israel cured me of my Zionism. Now I'm a committed secular diasporist.
When I was young, I thought I could never escape it. Now I'm older, I realize I don't want to.
Zu seiner Mensch, also wie mein Vater hat gesagt.
Living an honest and fruitful life, loving your neighbour as yourself, meaning everyone.
It's one of my strongest connections with my parents, to whom I owe so much, and to those who went before them.
Family first, children first, and remembering who you are.
Well, I'd call myself Jewish, which is a felicitous way of describing my inherent atheism.
We have a duty to fight our corner against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
Man batters himself bloody with his own forehead. From this sense of pain, he deduces that he is alive.
The only positive thing I can say is some of my best friends are rabbis.
Being Jewish means that I was witness to one of the most tragic events in history.
I observe the festivals in memory of my family and my childhood.
Yiddishkeit is ingrained in me.
I'm proud to be Jewish, but I wish I wouldn't have to pay such a high price for that privilege.
Did we need Hitler to remind us that we are Jews? I thank God daily that I am a Jew.
The world does not appreciate what we have contributed to civilization.
Ensuring the survival of the diaspora.
We had to choose to survive.
A Jewish grandmother never sleeps. She just worries with her eyes closed.
My mother sang me Yiddish lullabies, almonds and raisins, the sweet and the bitter. This steered me through life.
Family, tradition, and celebration of life. L'chaim.
I am Jewish. I can prove it with this.
It helps us still with living as well as with mourning.
Just read the 10 Commandments. It's all there.
Being Jewish means that I fought at Cable Street and won.
We don't do anything about it, but we don't forget. I'm a card-carrying heathen, and I've got all my own lashes.
What does being Jewish mean to me? I don't know. I don't know of any other way.
I hope people could enjoy that as much as I did. And there's some wonderful quotes there that really stick in my mind of what some people said about what it means for them to be Jewish.
There, Jewish, shall I speak?
Yes,
are there any questions? Maybe.
Could you, Benjamin, could you talk a bit about how the film has been received?
Yeah, it's been received really wonderfully, and I felt very proud to have made it, and yeah, there was a lot of love for it, actually, particularly amongst British audiences. The Americans needed subtitles to see it, which, you know, I just sort of thought, well, we invented this language, how very dare you? But I guess there are certain things, people using, you know, quite British things, like the woman who talked about Gesher, which is a school, you know, which you wouldn't necessarily catch, and because you know, the music needed to be at a certain volume to keep the sense that it was a musical. Some of the lines are a little bit difficult sometimes to hear. So there is a version with subtitles, which can be seen. But yeah, winning the award in Pittsburgh in America was a real honor. And they flew me out to Pittsburgh, and I got to spend time in that community, and it was just after the shooting in the synagogue. And so it was, you know, it was wonderful to go there and see that community mending itself with love. Actually, I think that was the thing that I felt very strongly. But you could have knocked me over with a feather when they said that it had won the gold prize, and that was a real treat. It really was.
And are there any follow-ons? Do you have any follow-ons from that, or is it that sort of one-off stuff?
Well, I mean, we've been making a lot of films with the choir, and little films, and I'm just trying to get a film off the ground at the moment about the Psalms, because the Psalms are the texts that link obviously Judaism and Christianity, but also there are musical traditions in Wales and in Scotland, in Welsh and in Gaelic Scottish, which are based on the Psalms. And so I'm wanting to create a kind of a four language piece, film about the Psalms, sung in Hebrew, Welsh, English, and Gaelic Scottish, which I think will be a really lovely sort of follow-up, an exploration, if you like, into what feels special about the Psalms, what unites people with the Psalms, and also I'm keen, you know, to feature people who might not necessarily be religious, because I think that's also quite interesting. Hang on a second, just excuse me, I'm going to plug my computer in. Talk amongst yourselves for 1 second, or else I'm running out of battery. 1 second.
So I can see there are a variety of questions in the chat, so I will pass over. I'll mention your name, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself rather than asking the question. Just wait for Ben to get back.
I'm back.
Right. So
you can
Liz,
still see me, can't you? I had to switch a lamp off.
Liz has a question for you, Ben.
Okay, Liz.
Unmute yourself.
Hi there. I'm asking this question, I suppose, as a wordsmith, as a poet. I couldn't always hear the words because the music got in the way. And I do often find that the more poetic the words are, the more I don't need music. And I always have a struggle between words and music. So your psalm project, I find a bit frightening because the words of the psalm are so wonderful. On the other hand, I know that the Jewish tradition is to sing in the synagogue. So what am I saying, you know? And I mean, the tradition of, you know, who won the Nobel Prize, but a songwriter, not a poet, though he won it for poetry. So I'm just wondering where your, where the importance of things lie for you in words or in music, or I suppose you're going to say the two coming together, but I find the two coming together difficult.
I mean, that's a very interesting point. I do like the fact that, having mentioned that many Jewish people have books in their houses, I'm just looking behind you and seeing more books than I can count. My mother would be proud of you. No, I think, yeah, I'm a music man. I believe in the power of music. That's a very important thing for me. And you know, it's a bit like I don't like dance that's not part of a musical. You know, for me, I think the more the merrier, really. Of course, you know, I think that's where my skills lie. That's where my interests lie, and that's actually my introduction to Judaism as a very early child came through my love of music and my love of the kind of the Jewish harmonies. I mean, it's slightly different in synagogue because yes, everything is sung, but we all know what the texts are. And actually, if you translate the texts into English, unless you're dealing with the Psalms, but when you're dealing with liturgy, you know, it can be, you know, not the most interesting imagery, should we say, in shul. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, music is very, very important. But of course, there are many people who find the beauty of words incredibly powerful, and you know, yes. But that's my world is music, and I hear music in dreams, and I hear music in everyday life, and it's a blessing and a curse. You know, I have perfect pitch, and so when a noise happens outside, I hear it as a note rather than as a sound. So I suppose that's my feeling.
Next question we have is from David Jewell. David, you'd like to ask your question?
Well, yes, having sort of picked myself up off the floor from hearing somebody saying that the music got in the way. I can't imagine music getting in the way of anything. But of course, then I do remind myself that it's called davar. So there we are. But my question to Ben was, I have a very poor visual sense. I confess that. But quite towards the end of your film, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, this is all in black and white. So I was very interested to ask what the reasoning was behind that. It didn't detract in any way. And I wondered if you thought color would have got in the way. But it was fascinating to me, as I said, because I didn't notice it until almost the end.
That's a really good question. And it was something that I thought long and hard about. And actually, as part of the aging process, as people get older, they start to develop blotchiness sometimes, and sometimes people and younger kids, you know, they have bad skin, and actually what I wanted to do was to create an even playing field so that everybody looked as beautiful as they could look, and I considered that to be. I also think when you're dealing with black and white, you look at people's eyes more. And so for me, I wanted it to have a timeless quality as well, because I didn't want people to go, oh, she was born in 1915, 1918. I wanted people to go, oh, that's a 100-year-old, and in 20 years' time, I want them still to be able to go, that's a 100-year-old, not that's a person who was born in 1918 who must therefore be 120 now. Do you see what I mean? Because I think part of the game of this film is to look at people who look really good for their age, and people who look like they've had a really hard life, as well as being able to peer into people's living rooms and see, you know, to see where they put their books and their trinkets. So yeah, it was about a choice that I made. For example, the guy who talked about Cable Street had terrible sores on the top of his head. It's just something that happens when you're 97 and you've got through that far. You know, your body starts to pack up. So we shot him here, this much of him, because, and he looks amazing and fantastic and strong. And I didn't want anyone to look at him and go, oh, pity that old man. You know, he fought at Cable Street. He has a right to be as dignified and beautiful as he is. So that's why we went for black and white.
Thank you. You don't need, just to finish, you don't need to tell me about skin getting blotchy with age, Ben. I see it in the mirror every time I look.
Do you know, as I was looking at you then, I was thinking what wonderful skin you had. So
Marion asked about, she wanted to see the list of names. Obviously it was blurred. So Marion, we will give you the link afterwards so that you can watch in your own time, and then you can pause. I did actually pause at the beginning. I thought, oh, actually that stops the flow, but it is very interesting to see the list of names. I don't know how many people you recognize. So of course the Stephen was Stephen Burkhoff, but there were many other people have recognized. Rabbi, Esther Ransom.
Ben Kaplan was there. Ben Kaplan was in Call the Midwife. He played the policeman in Call the Midwife. Henry Goodman was there. Vanessa Feltz. Janet Sussman, actress. Dame Janet Sussman. I think we had 3 dames in this film. There's a disproportionate number of Jewish dames, I suspect. And
Can I
Bernard
just ask,
Cox.
have you got the text of the words available?
I'm sure we can find them. Yes, or Bernard Cox was there as well. You'll be interested to hear the writer, the poet. He's the one who talks about almonds and raisins. And he was also at Cable Street. So, you know, I searched, the Holy Grail was finding one, and I found two.
Karen Singer, you wanted to ask a question next.
Hello. First of all, I really enjoyed it. A really good production.
Thank you.
It kept you on your toes all the time, you know, looking for things. But what I wanted to ask is, you referred to various communities that had seen it and responded. So I just wondered what variety of venues has it been seen, and where's it going forward?
It's been seen at a lot of Jewish film festivals in America. A lot of them have, I mean, there's something like 100 Jewish film festivals in America. It's insane. It's been seen in Manchester, in Glasgow, in Northampton, a lot in London. It was at the Limud 2 years ago. So it does the round. It went online for a short period through UK Jewish Film. I work for UK Jewish Film. I'm the partnerships manager there, so I don't know whether any of you saw any of the festival this year, but it's very worth, if you don't know much about UK Jewish Film, having a little look at what they do, because they commission 2 short films every single year with Jewish themes, British short films. And actually, one of the things I should say is that this is quite a political statement, but fewer and fewer British Jewish art is emerging at the moment. And I think that's as a direct result of the white other box, which we're all forced to tick if we're not religious. So, you know, so often in forms for the Arts Council, for the census, we either have to register ourselves as religious Jewish, or we don't get counted and we're just under the white other box. And so this is something that I'm keen to explore, actually, because it seems that the official figure suggests that as many as 50% of Jewish people don't view themselves as religious. So what do those 50%, how do we get counted? And if you don't protect the minority status of Jewish people as not as a religion, but as a race, then you can't protect Jewish music, Jewish humor, Jewish cookery, you know. So the Arts Council doesn't have investment in Jewish culture because it doesn't believe that Jewish people exist as a race. It believes that it is just a religion, it's just a choice. And that, to me, is a terrible shame. And for the first time this year, the UK Jewish Film Festival didn't have a full-length English Jewish film, for the first time ever. So we do need to start really, really, really thinking about what it means to be Jewish. Is being Jewish just a religion, or is it a race? And there's lots of people who are talking about genetics of Jewish people. There are certain diseases that Jewish people are more likely to get. So if you don't have a box at your doctor's surgery, for example, that says you can, you have Jewish heritage, if you end up with diverticulitis or Crohn's disease or any of the illnesses associated with Jewish people, then you might not have them spotted by doctors. So anyway, that's just a slight aside, but I do think it's a thing that we all need to think about, actually.
That's another talk all in itself, I can tell you.
Absolutely.
Clive Lawton wants to ask the next question. Clive, if you could unmute.
Thanks very much, Benjamin. It was beautiful, and we were just saying when it finished, can't we applaud or something? And the moment was lost, but it was just lovely.
Thank you.
What you were saying before about Jews not being a religion, the word religion is not an original Hebrew word. There isn't one. Modern Hebrew had to make one up to say it back into European discourse. I'm not sure about race either. I quite like clan or people or or something like that. But anyway,
I agree.
The question I wanted to ask was, obviously each of those voices was very distinct and individual. And my instinct is to always want to find a pattern. And I'm not sure that I could, which was perhaps the whole point. But I did notice that the children not infrequently talked about Hanukkah. And it seemed to me that as the people got older, they actually interestingly became, or there were more combative voices.
Yes.
More people who felt there was a battle to be had, or a fight, or a something, or and I just wondered whether you detected any generational shifts, that this generation was more like this, or that generation felt their Jewishness in another way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in purely sort of crude terms, I would say the majority of ethnic diversity would be within young people. That's perhaps unsurprising. I would say, yes, a lot of the children talk about, well, a lot of people talk about food, but a lot of the children talked about food and presents. And I suppose you'd expect that. There's a turning point where I think where Jewish people have suffered for being Jewish in this film. I think a lot of people in their 50s and 60s understand grief, which you would expect. And so a lot of the responses were about losing loved ones at that point. But there's that shift where the guy says, being Jewish meant that I experienced one of the greatest tragedies. And he's our first Holocaust survivor. He's Dutch. And talks, he does talks in schools and all sorts about the slow loss of liberty in his childhood. He was very, very young, and suddenly, being told you can't play with these people, you can't go to this shop, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then suddenly he's in, Theresienstadt, and he doesn't know where his father is anymore. And I think that's a big turning point. And the person I'd love to mention is the lady who's representing 1929 is a very dear old friend of mine. And when I did this project, I said, she has to be in it. I'm not interested in anyone else from 1929, she's called Vera, and she was sent to Stutthof. She's Lithuanian. And she was put in the queue for the gas chambers. And she hung back because everyone was pushing to get in, and the doors closed and she was left on the other side, and she stood there for an hour, and an SS officer came along and said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, the door closed, I can't get in." And they said, "Well, we'll find work for you." And they sent her around the other way. And by that time, all the women's clothing had gone. And so she had to wear a men's pajama suit. And she was 14. And the women who she lived with saw her as a talisman. If they could keep the girl alive, that there would be hope. And Vera was, when I first met her, I was in my early 20s, and she was this flirtatious, fantastic older lady. And she used to invite me around for dinners at her house every Sunday. And one day I was saying that my favorite actress was Billie Whitelaw. And she said, "What would you do if you met Billie Whitelaw?" I said, I'd faint. And the next Sunday I was put next to Billie Whitelaw at the table to have my dinner. And Vera, sadly, in recent years, has lost the ability to speak. And it took her every last piece of energy to say, ensuring the survival of the diaspora. And she focused and focused and focused, and she said that line. And for me, that was the resilience of Jewish people. That was the woman that had been to Stutthof and survived the war and the winter marches, and that made me feel so proud.
Thanks very much. Isabel, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, thank you, Ben. I also found your film really moving and wanted to clap and actually cry at the end. It was really beautiful. I was wondering, given that you'd brought together this amazing community of people, whether there had ever been any opportunity to get them together. I'm sure the answer is no, but I wondered if you did even get some of them together.
We did a screening very early on, and I think we had about 60 of them there. I believe everybody has now seen the film. I think in the Jewish Film Festival that corresponded to its release, I think they played it 6 or 7 times, so people had choices to go to different venues. But there was this wonderful screening at the Finchley, the East Finchley Phoenix cinema, where and I asked those who'd been in the film to stand up, and half the audience rose, and that was a very proud moment for me. As was the moment where we screened it in front of the 100-year-old, and being able to, who was actually 99 because she was born in 2018. She was just 99 when we filmed it, and she passed 100 just after the premiere. So there was a kind of a 2-month gap between filming and the premiere, at which point she turned 100. So she was 100 by the time she saw the film. And that was a great honor for me to have her there.
Yeah, I think you sort of captured something that reminds me of what we're all going through at the moment with what we're doing this evening. You know, we're all at home on our own, but we can see each other on the screen. And ahead of, you know, way before COVID, you created something that was lots of individuals, but collectively, it's just a beautiful and very thought-provoking whole, and reminds everybody that they're all part of something much bigger. So it was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
And I should say actually that, you know, one of the things I'm trying to do at UK Jewish Film is look at the smaller Jewish communities, because I think there is so much emphasis on London and Manchester, maybe a bit of Leeds, but and one of the things I toured some films with the festival last year, and we brought Solomon and Gaynor to Bristol actually, and we brought the director there. But you know, as a man who grew up in the Midlands, having never met another Jewish person, it's very important to me that UK Jewish Film are now starting to listen to the smaller communities. And having an online festival this year, I think, was very interesting for them, because suddenly they were seeing people who were watching films in, you know, Stoke-on-Trent, in Thetford in Norfolk, you know, tiny little enclaves of Jewishness, of people who sometimes feel quite isolated and quite unable to access Jewish culture. And I think that's what's so wonderful about Davar, is that you're actually doing that. You have an outlet, you have a way that you can celebrate your Jewishness or your Yiddishkeit or whatever the Sephardi equivalent is. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And I was there watching Solomon and Gaynor at the Watershed, and it was a wonderful film. It was lovely to be able to ask the director questions about it. It was really great. The next, sadly, Mark Jacobs is gone, but I thought I'd share his comment. I'm sure this is probably one of the favorites of many people. He said, "I love the line, 'A Jewish grandmother never sleeps. She just worries with her eyes closed.'" That resonates with a lot. I think my favorite was the one, I can't remember who said it, but the person who said being Jewish is asking a question and being answered with another question.
Yes. Yeah, and only getting questions back as answers.
Only question getting back as answers.
Yeah, and that, you know, that to me is a very, very Jewish trait. I mean, that's what shul is. You know, it's there to ask questions. You know, the whole central force of Judaism is the asking of questions and never really finding the answers, because you just keep on asking questions. And I think that that is something that feels very important and special about Jewish people, actually. Yeah.
Jeanette, do you want to ask your question?
Yep, I think I'm unmuted now. Am I?
You're okay? Yeah,
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you. That was a beautiful film. I was just curious because there's not many sort of documentaries that use this sort of approach, but I did see a film years ago when it was made around 2002 or sometime after that. And it was directed by a guy called Brian Hill, and it was called Feltham Sings.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you might have been influenced by a film like that, or any other films that might have been made. There are a few that exist, but I wondered if they might have led you a little bit or give you some ideas.
It's a really interesting question. I developed my style of documentary filmmaking before I knew of Brian's work. I subsequently met him and spoken on panels with him. And we have a bit of an interesting love-hate relationship, because I don't consider him to be an exponent of decent music, and he doesn't consider me to be a documentary maker. So there's a really interesting conflict there, because as you know, as I explained earlier, you know, I'm a music man. Music is the beating heart of what I do, and I like a piece to be through composed. I like I don't think in Brian's films the person does a talking heads interview, just a normal documentary, and then they sort of sing a wistful song you know, about what they've spoken about. For me, I think it's really important that the narrative thrust comes through the music. Otherwise you're just singing a song. But no, I have a huge amount of respect for Brian. In many ways, he's kind of ruined the art form, because Feltham Sings did so well, and then the rest of his films started to get a bit predictable. You know, he did Porn, the musical, and things like that, and they were not very successful, which then tarnished the art form in a funny sort of way. But Feltham Sings is still a wonderful film. You know, it's extraordinary. It really is. And the poetry of Simon Armitage, who does the words, is you know, it's just fantastic.
Yes, I think what I liked about that film, but also some of yours as well, is the kind of awkwardness with some of the singing. That, you know, not everyone has been gifted with that talent of singing, but in a way it doesn't really matter. It's, if they want to sing it, then that's kind of coming from them. And while the singers in your film, most of them sang really beautifully, some of them, you know, it was still kind of, you know, a little bit amateur, you know, Vanessa Bell maybe.
Yeah.
but that was the beauty of it.
Well, I made a film actually in Greater Manchester on the Hattersley estate, which is where the Moors murderers were from, which is an incredibly dark, wistful film, and it's performed by the matriarchs of the estate, the women that used to clip ne'er-do-wells around the ear. You know, and it's you know, one of them is singing about the death of her father, one of them, and it's a much darker film. And the women, of course, you know, many of them have got incredibly low voices, but it's very interesting when a real person sings about their own life, and where an actress may, you know, have a little tear dripping down the eye, you know, and a real person will often hold that emotion in, and you'll see behind their eyes that they're holding pain. And to me, that is what makes the art form fascinating, because you're dealing with how people deal with genuine emotion. And of course, the problem with singing is once you start singing, you can't hold emotion down. It's really hard, because singing triggers, it comes from the diaphragm, it triggers this open passage, and it brings up with it all the guts and the pain. And so that's why I like the art form.
Thank you. David Dweck, do you want to raise your point, or?
I was merely making a point. It wasn't really a question, Ben. I just wanted you to know how much I appreciated the film. I was utterly mesmerised by it, and I'm definitely going to watch it at least another 2 times.
Thank you.
I was also really interested in what you were saying as well about the way in which we identify. I am also a convert, and the way that Jewish people identify is really important for me, because I think self-identity is very important. And just thinking about how small the numbers are, apparently, about the numbers of Jews in Britain and how that just connects to religious Jews. I was talking to somebody not so long ago about the 2021 census, and I don't know whether there's been a decision or not, that, you know, whether we are going to be allowed to self-identify as Jews in the ethnicity question.
A decision has been made. If you live in Scotland, the answer is yes. If you live in England, the answer is no. So there we go. I mean, that's as weird and as you know. And actually, I'm working with Rachel Riley at the moment, you know, Countdown host, on the idea of creating a documentary called White Other, which is all about the ticking of that box. And one of the things Rachel said to me, she considers herself to be an atheist, and she said, "Am I even being counted?" And that's a really interesting question for me. We have this figure of 350,000 British Jewish people. How many more people would identify as Jewish if you allowed them to be culturally Jewish or part of a tribe? What would happen to the figures then? They go skew with, because some people would tick religion and tribe, some people would tick just religion, but the problem is, many of the groups are, the Jewish groups are based on religion. So, you know, if you go to the Board of Deputies or whatever, and say, well, what is Jewish, a religion or a tribe, or they'll say, well, it's a religion. No self-respecting Jewish person wouldn't be religious. So I think that's the big issue. I think too much is spent looking at the kind of the chief rabbi and the modern Orthodox, and not enough actually looking at secular Jewish groups.
Some of my best friends are Jews, actually. Did you know that? And
one of those comments was, being Jewish allowed to have some of your best friends were rabbis. I thought
Yes, the only positive I can say is that some of my best friends are rabbis. Yeah.
So, Karen, I'm going to skip you to Marion, because Karen asked that. Marion, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, and were there lots of disappointed people who didn't get into the film?
I think I'm so pleased you asked a question, though, because I've been looking at your face thinking, what a wonderful face you've had all the way through. I think that when we made the film, no one had any idea what it was, you know, and it's almost impossible to describe it to anyone. So you just sort of had to say, will you come with me on this journey? So I think a lot of people, I mean, I was very disappointed. There's a woman called Heidi who was the same year of birth as Fenella Fielding, and we chose Fenella, and then Fenella had her moment, and then Heidi got really ill, so we couldn't film Heidi. And actually the woman that replaced Fenella was the woman who talks about a Jewish grandmother never sleeps, she just worries with her eyes closed. So actually I think we lucked out. Fenella, I think, was going to say something awful like, it's terrible from beginning to end. Yeah, I was disappointed. I don't know whether anyone was particularly aware, because I didn't want to do is sort of contact people and go, you know, sometimes I would ask people what they would say and choose what I considered to be the most interesting response. I think the chazan at my synagogue was a bit disappointed not to be included, but it was him or Vanessa Feltz, and so yeah, exactly. And I have to say, Vanessa Feltz, of all the people we worked with, was the most charming and conscientious and welcoming of all the kind of the well-known people. I mean, I was welcomed into every household, I have to say, but of the well-known people, she just was, you know, she was just wonderful. Whereas Esther Ranson, not so much.
Okay, I think we should call it a day and express our thanks to Benjamin. That was both a wonderful film and lovely discussion and explanation. And I don't know if we can try it. We can all unmute each other and clap, although whether it will make a cacophony or any sound, I don't know, but let's have a go. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And for Devar members, I will circulate in the next email, I will circulate a link to the film with the password so you can watch it your own. If you're not a Devar member, please join, that would be lovely. But if you email me, we'll still send you the link. You don't have to join. And just to let you know, we are almost completing our next season. We'll soon be up on the website. And because we will still be doing these Zoom things rather than face-to-face, we're actually going to have more than our usual 3 talks. We're hopefully going to have 4 or 5 talks, about 1 a month, which would be great. And I'm really hoping Benjamin will love this. We were going to show the documentary about Fiddler on the Roof, The Miracle of Miracles, which our local cinema has got for us, but obviously we had to postpone that because of the COVID restrictions. Hopefully, if in the new year the cinema is allowed to reopen, we will be showing our usual array of different films. And thank you all very much for joining us, and Chag Sameach for Hanukkah.
Chag Sameach.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We didn't have anybody.
Thank you.